So the series must have done really well because they then invited you to do a second kind of spin-off series for them. Did
Yeah.
you try to, I mean, did the editor also say, no, this arc is done, it needs to be a spin-off? Was there ever any discussion about extending this series?
It actually was going to be three more of the same series. And what happened was, gosh, we were a few months from publication. And all of a sudden they decided that rather than do book 5, 6, and 7, because remember what I told you about how sales can drop with, they decided, because my characters flew to a new continent, so some of them decide, we need to spread our kind to be safe in the future, right? So we need to populate more places. So a group flies to another continent, and there they get captured by humans. So I added humans to this story, and so it was like some of the same characters, but a whole new storyline. And they decided that it would be smart to make it a new trilogy because, again, you get more sales on the first book. You know what I mean? Like it's a whole new thing, and like a kid who read maybe The Guardian Herd and didn't like it might try this and love this one. And
Mhm.
so they went ahead and hired a new artist, and we titled it Riders of the Realm. The first one is The Guardian Herd, and this one's Riders of the Realm. And so yeah, it was a very strategic decision by Harper to, instead of continuing on, to just do a whole new series and pick up new readers.
Mhm.
And then if readers like this trilogy, the other series serves as the backstory for this whole thing. So a
Right.
lot of people who start with this end up going back and reading the other four. So the series, like for the publisher, they sell each other. So
Mhm.
it was very smart.
For for you as an author, though, was it difficult by that point to write as if your reader, like with fresh for a fresh reader? I mean, what I mean is, did you find yourself often just assuming that the reader would know things about your world, seeing as you're already 4 books into it,
um,
and the world is so well established in your own mind?
Right. The interesting thing about that is, so that's what's great about the editor. My editor was fantastic. I had the same one for all 7 books. She, even on book 4 of The Guardian Herd, she always said, do not assume that a child hasn't accidentally picked up this book and it's their first introduction to the series. So she always made sure that I would kind of filter, sprinkle in a little backstory from the first book, and just helping to ground a reader who either forgot book 3, can't remember what happened, they took a break,
Mm-hmm.
or just picked it up. So when I switched to the new series, she was right there to make sure that I did not leave anyone behind by assuming anything. So yeah, I was able to spring, she made sure that I didn't do that. I mean, that definitely was the editor watching out for the reader, which is what they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they were very protective of the reader to make sure that they were never confused and that they knew what was going on, and they always felt grounded. So that was good.
So just quickly now before I open up for questions. So now, right now, you're working on YA instead of MG, so that there's a genre shift.
Yeah.
And on top of that, um, you're doing mystery, so very, very different again. And it's not a series, although the books you sold, was it a 2-book deal this
Yeah.
time? And both books had to be series, correct?
For this
I
new
mean, had to be mysteries. Yeah.
Yeah, they both just had to be teen thrillers, but they didn't have to be connected. Yeah.
Right. So tell us what the biggest differences are between working on kind of single volumes rather than working on a series.
So it is very different because, so I sold this, teen thriller, and then they want another one, but the coming up with a whole new concept, like when you sell a book, you already know everybody likes it. And when you continue the world, when it's a series, they're just going to continue to like it. But when you sell a thriller and then you have to write another thriller, you know, it's going to be completely different. Like if you wrote Gone Girl, your second book's not Gone Girl. It's going to be something else, and readers are going to love it or hate it or whatever. It's very strange because I mean, it's not the imagination part. I love coming up with a new world and new characters and everything, but but it has to be as good as, you know, the one that you sold. And as, I don't know if, I mean, from my track record writing 20 manuscripts, I've sold half of them, right? So sometimes you write, I mean, not all of them have been submitted, I will tell you. Some have no one's read yet, but I've had books get rejected. So I know that you can write a book that even a publisher or editor who loves you will say, no, that's not working. So that doesn't really happen with a series because it's already working. They already bought the first one and they just work with you on the story. You know, the storyline might not be great, but the concept they love, the world they love, the characters they love. So anyway, now I'm just hoping that the second book that I've come up with for my second thriller, that they like it as much and they don't say like, yeah, no, we don't like that concept, or we don't like that book at all, come up with something else. You know, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen because I've never been in these shoes where, yeah, I have to come up with a whole new standalone and hope they like it as much as the first one. So it is different.
Are you tempted to go back to series then, to writing series?
I really love the teen thriller, and I'll say that what I also love about standalone books is that you don't have any pressure to, I mean, that writing, it was an intense writing schedule. And I kind of like, you know, you get one book, you know, it's complete in itself. It doesn't have to have the other ones to go with it. It's kind of freeing in a different way. It's kind of nice. And after I write this one, you know, each time I get to just come up with a whole new world, which is kind of exciting because you can also get trapped in a series and then you can't get out. I didn't feel that way, but it was refreshing to move on. So I'm not like in a hurry to jump into another big long series right now. I also got very lucky. My editor never left, because I know people that get involved in a series and then the editor leaves and they may not have as good a relationship for the next editor. They might get assigned to an editor. So I got very, very lucky that way. But another plus side though to a series is you grow a readership. You have a lot of time to grow like a loyal readership. With the standalones, you know, they want the next thriller out the following year. So the first one's coming out next fall, next September. And then the following one they want out, I think they want it to come out in fall of 22. So they'll be 1 year apart. And even though they're standalones though, when it comes to kids books, teen or middle grade, they just want you to keep going. So the stressful part is each one will have to be completely new and different. But it's also like, if I want to take a break, I'm not in the middle of a series that I can't stop, you know? Yeah. Or if I want to write something else, I can, and then I can come back. It's just easier to jump around and do what you want.
Right. There has to be a bit more freedom in it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hands up. Put your hands up digitally or physically if you do have a question. Carol, why don't we start with you?
So I had a couple questions. The first one was, you know, we all know about J.K. Rowling and George R.R. Martin and the like, and how long they take to come out with their second book, and even though it's in a series. And I know, so would you see that that's kind of a big difference between, say, middle grade YA and whoever they're peddling to? Is that, I don't know what their deals are like, you know, to tell you the truth.
Well, publishers are pretty, I think, lenient. You know, if you have a family issue or something going on and you don't make your deadline, I've never really heard of anyone getting, I've just heard of editors being pretty lenient with people. They can't really force you to make your deadline. So, but I think with J.K. Rowling, she can do whatever she wants. I mean, you know, those books got so popular, people will wait, but ideally they probably would have rather had her, and her readership also was so huge that you weren't aging out necessarily. You were just aging in more readers, you know, every year. But so but yeah, ideally I think that for middle grade, because kids, they're in and out of elementary school and middle school so quickly, that they prefer 2 books a year. And I've heard that, from HarperCollins. If it's a commercial series, they really want 2 books a year, ideally. And then for YA, it seems to be more like 1 book a year. So it's a little bit slower pace. And when it comes to adult, it's whatever the adult wants. There's no, adults aren't aging out of being adults. They're dying out of it, but they're not aging out of it. So there's really no rush. People will wait 10 years for their favorite author to write a book. But a child in 10 years, if they're 10 years old, now they're 20 and they're not going to read it. So that's kind of the difference.
Yeah, I was thinking, and the second question was, have you considered, since now you're getting into the teen horror type of things, I guess, had you considered maybe doing some kind of serial like a Nancy Drew or with the similar characters doing different things, or, that kind of thing? And what do you see would be like the downsides and upsides of something like that?
I think that actually is a great, always a great evergreen kind of concept. I think it works best for middle grade. For YA, unless it's a big fantasy series, I think YA readers are more into the standalone books. They fall in love with authors like John Green, and they read everything he writes because of his voice. I think that they just respond very strongly to voice. And or maybe someone who writes kind of romantic stories, they're going to want to read all their romantic stories, and they don't need to be connected because they love the author's voice and the way that they write stories. So I think feel like they get kind of, adults and teens get more attached to the authors and their style. And then the middle grades are, the middle grade readers are really in love with the characters. They most of them, a lot of them don't even know who wrote the book. So they just really love the characters. Not that teens don't fall in love with characters, they do. If they fall in love with characters, they will actually look at the author and look for more of their books. But middle graders don't tend to do that. They're just not as, they're not as savvy on researching everything, and they don't look for authors on Instagram or whatever. They're just, a lot of them don't have computers. They're 8 to 12. So now they do. Now they all have computers, but yeah, they're just younger, so they just fall in love with the characters. Seems like.
Cool. Okay.
Chris, you had a question.
Yeah. So when you were writing, you got into your Pegasus series like several books in, and obviously you had to do it in a pretty short amount of time. Did you find yourself having to keep like sort of a series Bible, which is what they call it in TV, like basically like what are the herds, who's in charge of them, like all that kind of stuff? And how did you do that? Like, did you use any software or just a notebook?
So that's a really great question. This is what really amazed me. My editor did that. The publisher kept the series Bible. And I definitely had my pages and pages of notes, all that, but they kept, so the copy editors, they had the whole series Bible. They knew who was in charge of what herd and all that stuff. And they had descriptions of everybody, descriptions of the terrain. They had, the details were amazing. And they would send it, they called it a style sheet. They also, any word that I made up, they put in there. So they had all the vocabulary, the definitions, and then they would send that to me. So it was really cool because I would just print it and I just add it. And I actually would have to read it, and every now and then they would get something wrong, and I would fix it, or I would get something wrong and I'd fix it in the manuscript. So they kept the series Bible, interestingly enough. And it was very handy and extremely detailed. And I'm not this super detail oriented person, so I really appreciated it. It was really amazing. But if you are into that, I totally recommend doing that. And if the publisher doesn't do it, you would absolutely have to do it. And it also went over the timeline of everything, even what season we were in. So they were very, very anal about the consistency and everything looking. And I'll tell you, even with all of that, there's every now and then little mistakes will get through. They just will.